Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing today? So it is officially the March 25th lineup of pro days. Yesterday we had the Notre Dame, Auburn, Louisville pro days. We're going to get into those, man. Just going to get right into this. We've talked about this ad nauseum, so I'm just going to highlight this for a minute, and then I'm going to get into other players. But Jeremiah Love, we've already been there, man. The pro days for him. We also the Price, the running back from Notre Dame, Malachi Fields. There's good players coming out of the Notre Dame program, man. A lot of pub around Jeremiah Love coming to the Commanders right now. Typically, hearing these reports at this stage in the draft process, it's too much smoke. This is lying season, man. So as much as I love Jeremiah Love, trust me, there's so many different routes that this team could go. There's trade backs. Adam Peters is very, very smart, man. He knows what he's doing, man. As far as generating interest, man. We know what Jeremiah Love is on the field. It's a lot of other players we're going to focus on today, man. The day before, we had Miami, Duke, LSU and Iowa. Logan Jones, a center that I really, really love, coming out of Iowa, man. I think he's really, really going to be a value pick in this draft. There's some really, really good centers in this draft, which is going to lead me to today's set of pro days as far as Ohio State, Alabama, and Nebraska. Lots of really, really good defensive tackles, man. There's a lot of really, really good interior offensive linemen. There's a lot of really, really good interior defensive linemen in this class. The reported interest in Caden McDonald, it doesn't surprise me at all, man. Caden McDonald is a really, really good player. I've talked about Lee Hunter. That's going to be tomorrow's, list of pro day for Texas Tech. We're in it, man. Miami Hurricanes, man. Interior defensive line. Really, really good tackles, whether it's Markel Bell, Maui Noah, Utah with Fanu, and Lanu, the other offensive tackle there, man. Just the trenches in this draft are very, 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 very prominent, man. We're going to go to another player that I don't think is actually working out for Louisville. We're talking about yesterday's pro day, but he's a really, really talented player, and I think he's going to fall. But that's Chris Bell in this draft. Chris Bell is a really, really talented wide receiver, man. Big, physical, fast. Coming off an ACL injury, where is he going to fall in this draft? It's always hard to predict injury and things like that, and where a player is going to be available. There's a ton that goes into it, man. Auburn, we talked about Keldrick Falk and guys like that. Chris Bell is a guy who really, really excelled over there at Louisville, man. Casey Concepcion from last year transferred over to Texas A&M. We saw what he did. We saw how well that translated and things like that. I think Chris Bell had a real chance of being an early day one pick before the ACL injury. I think it's going to be very, very telling. The medicals and things like that, teams are going to, they're going to be on it. Chris Bell is a guy that can definitely win, man. Has a little bit of that Brandon Marshall element to his game. Can play back shoulder, can play a little bit more finesse than I think his build necessarily, indicates he can. Again, man, Chris Bell's a hell of a player, man. I think this guy's going to be a value pick in the draft. I didn't want to continue to go over Jeremiah Love. We've talked about it, and also we're going to continue to talk about it, especially with all the reports being Commander's base and things like that. But again, man, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things going into this draft that are really, really going to be. I don't know. It's going to be really, really interesting to see, man. I think there's starting to get to be a point, as far as reports and things like that. Washington, the top 30 visits are coming out, man. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to report on. But again, this is lying season, man. So when your team is being constantly talked about, like whether it's Mansour Lane, and you're talking about whether it's, the Miami Dolphins, he's getting mocked there a lot, but, and then you get his pro day where he runs a 4.38, more than likely a cornerback that has the tape that he had last year, with everything that he does, the way that he excelled, only giving up a few first downs, in coverage and things like that. I think it's going to be very, very telling where this kid ends up going. Today's pro day, we're going to talk about it because yesterday there wasn't as many on-field things that I wanted to talk about. But this is Caden McDonald clips. The interior presence that this guy gives you, man, from the nose tackle position. I mean, he can play the 3-4, can play the 4-3. Caden McDonald kept all them linebackers clean over there in Ohio State, man. And the reason I'm highlighting him is not only due to the interest that we're starting to hear about rumored to the Commanders. It's because we've talked about the Sonny Styles, we've talked about the Arvell Reeses, we've talked about the Caleb Downs for Ohio State, man. Realistically, man, this program, there's an opportunity for this program to have 4 of the top 5, picks in this draft. I mean, there's a realistic scenario where it could go Fernando Mendoza, and then, it could be Arvell Reese, and then, pick number 3, it could be Sonny Styles. I think Field Yates actually did this mock where it was Fernando Mendoza, and then Rich Eisen was talking about it where it was Fernando Mendoza, then it was Arvell Reese, then it was Sonny Styles, then it was Tate, and then Downs. I mean, it's just there is a real world scenario where the Ohio State Buckeyes could be for the top 5 picks. That team was loaded, man. The roster was absolutely loaded for that team. And I mean, I got to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes at this clip because realistically, man, there's Adam Peters would love nothing more than to move back a few spots, recoup some extra picks. The strength of this draft is definitely in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round of this draft, man. You're still going to get quality starters in this draft. There's people are talking about the lack of talent overall at the running back position. There's some quality running backs that are going to go later. Are you going to find that dynamic starter outside of Jeremiah Love? I think it's Jeremiah Love or bust. I do like Jadarian Price. I do like the Nebraska running back. I do really, really like the Miami running back. But again, like most of these running backs, again, are going to be value 4th, 5th, 6th round players who can come in. Maybe they're not the media starters, but they're going to be really, really good role players. Whether you want that thumper in the run game, whether you want that elusive pass catcher in the run game, to come in on 3rd downs or whatever. It's going to be situational running backs and things like that. Jeremiah Love is a 1-on-1. He's that one, every 3 to 5 year type guy. There's a lot of other running backs, man, whether it's the Nebraska Pro Day and their running back, Emmett Johnson, man, really, really good player. Jonah Coleman, the Washington running back, man, he's a big elusive guy, which is kind of crazy, when you think about it like that. Washington from Arkansas is getting a lot of hype. But again, this Ohio State Pro Day, man, like there's this team is absolutely loaded. The dominating presence that McDonald gives you from the interior of that team. Alabama's Pro Day is today. They have quite a few wide receivers that I think are they got a wide receiver that I think is going to go probably somewhere from like the 3rd round. I think he's a little bit too rich to go in the 2nd round for that team. We know that Ty Simpson is the wild card position of this draft as far as the 2nd quarterback. Where is the 2nd quarterback going to go? Is it going to be late round 1? Is it going to be round 2? Is it even going to be round 3? Just due to the surplus and the lack of surplus at the position, which is a big part of the reason why this position is considered so weak in this draft. Again, man. The other reason I'm talking about the Ohio State Pro Day, man, is there's a really, really big contingency at this draft. All right, hold on. I'm trying to find some of these players. Actually, we can go there. Even though his pro day is already gone, I'm going to actually highlight this player, man. I think he did himself some really, really good work. Avion Terrell, Clemson's pro day, another interior presence, man. This was a pro day that happened a couple weeks ago. Him and Peter Wood, man, they've really, really solidified their draft stock, man. TJ Parker, we saw what he did at the combine. Again, man, Clemson, for whatever they had, man, there was a reason that they went into the season, with all the preseason hype, man. They have a lot of really, really good players. The quarterback play wasn't up to par. It didn't translate. I really thought their quarterback was really going to have a much better season than what he ended up having. But we know the NFL draft. The NFL draft is not about, ultimate team success. The Ohio State Buckeyes could have 4 of the top 5 picks. They were out in the first round of the, college football playoffs due to how they played against, due to basically Miami. Miami stepped up. I felt like, Miami in that game ultimately had the better quarterback play when it was all said and done. They had the better wide receivers, they had the better overall roster as far as, skill positions and things like that. But trenches matter in this draft. That's why I highlighted Katie McDonald. I think this draft is a lot stronger at the interior positions. I think it's got some pretty good offensive tackles. I do think there's a tier drop after the first 3 to 5 of them. And then after that, I think there's an even bigger drop. And then, you'll start to find value again around the 3rd, 4th round. But again, man, I wanted to bring up Clemson's pro day because, I didn't really get a chance to highlight them players. We were going through a lot of free agency and stuff like that when they were coming in. I think Avion Terrell has really, really exemplified himself and stood out as a prospect who's probably solidified himself and probably going to be a day 1 pick. Could he fall to day 2? Top 40 is where I think this guy goes. I don't think he gets out of the first 8 picks in the 2nd round. I think he's done everything to solidify himself. And honestly, when it comes to Peter Wood and TJ Parker, I think they're in the same boat. I think TJ Wood and, there's a few of them, whether it's Caleb Banks, Kaden McDonald, or Peter Wood. I think these 3 interior defensive tackles, man, for whatever they had for their season, maybe the team success didn't happen. We all know what Lee Hunter did again. That's another guy that I'm really, really high on. I think Lee Hunter is probably the best of the bunch. I think Kaden McDonald is right behind him in that marker. Again, I think all these guys are, pretty much fringe top 40 picks. I think all 4 of them guys should hear their name in the top 40 picks. But again, because a lot of these grades are so similar, man, I think a lot of the consensus after you get out of the top 12 is that's when the draft starts, man. You could see guys that you've been seeing mocked, late 1st round going in the top 15. You could also see a lot of these guys that have been mocked in the top 15 going maybe even in the beginning of round 2. So again, man, Avion Terrell, Peter Wood, TJ Parker, the range for these guys, it's really about what the teams feel like come draft day, and things like that, and how much do they value, the year before tape and things like that, and the team success. How much are they factoring in team success into their thing with Clemson and them, having a bad year and things like that. I think there's a lot that goes into this. So, these pro days are very, very important. Notre Dame, we all knew that Price and, Jeremiah Love, they really, really blew it up at the combine. Got to kind of sit on that. They still did some on-field work. There was a lot of team meetings and things like that. The team meetings are what's really, really important at the pro day season. You're starting to really, really see where these teams are valuing the top 30 visits. Are starting to come in. The Washington Commanders, Kaden McDonald. They're going to have Mekhi Lemon, Mansour Delane. You're going to have Carnell Tate, I'm sure, at some point. There's going to be a ton of them, man. Whether it's Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs, they're going to get an invite. David Bailey, whether they're available or not, they're still going to get these invites and things like that. So again, man, it's going to be it's a very, very busy season for this time of the year, man. And I think the last pro day is March 31st. It's going to be Tennessee, and then once we get past these pro days, it's the 20-some day lead up to the draft. You start to really, really get the top 30 visits start to actually take place. It's a busy, busy season, man, and it's all these teams trying to maneuver around. A lot of teams would love to trade back in this draft and accrue, multiple mid-round picks because there's going to be a lot of starters that are drafted in this draft in the mid-round. Is that a avenue that the Washington Commanders are going to work? I think they would love to. I think that's why they're doing a lot of the things that they do. But all these teams do this. All these teams are trying to create interest and create buzz towards certain prospects and towards certain players. Ultimately, man, I can highlight every player from this Ohio State team, man. Like they're all really, really talented, man. Whether it's coming out this year, whether it's coming out next year. We all know Jeremiah Smith, similar with Caleb Downs from last year. Caleb Downs, if he had came out in last year's draft, would have been the top safety off the board. Solidified that again this year. Man, trust me, it's really really going down, man. Oregon, they put out really really talented players, whether it's Pegnon or Kenyon Sadiq. They got another offensive tackle in World who's a really 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 good player. They got the running backs, they got the wide receivers. I mean, just Daniel Thiemann, solidified himself as a top 15, top 12 player in this draft. The pro days are indicative, man, especially for the guys that didn't test at the combine. Again, I always tell you that the tape really doesn't matter as far as how that goes. The tape is what ultimately matters. The pro days, they kind of just solidify them. You see the movement skills, you see the traits. Can somebody come in and show you even better, movement skills? Like Igbinosun, the cornerback from Ohio State. This is going to be a very very big day for him. We all know what he is on tape. We can see he's tall. He's got the range. He's got the speed. A little bit grabby. I mentioned this with Muhammad, the cornerback from Texas yesterday. Igbinosun's another player like that. It's can he show elite level movement skills? Can he show really really good hips? Turn and run balance and things like that. We've seen him improve over his time at Ohio State, but again we've seen him be grabby. We've seen him kind of at the catch point being a little bit more grabby. That's going to be a narrative about him going into this draft, and then year one, year two, can he start to clean those things up? Can he stop panicking at the catch point and things like that, where he gets a little bit grabby in college? And in the NFL, there's going to be a lot more flags that come from that guy. The difference between being a Benjamin St-Juste or being a basically the version that the Washington Commanders got of Marshon Lattimore. When you're being very, very grabby at the catch point, man, the referees are going to throw these flags, especially when you're going against these top flight receivers, man. These top flight receivers are making money for a reason, man. But again, that's another thing that I kind of wanted to get into with this pod, because yesterday I'm pretty much going over yesterday's, whether it's the Jadarian Prices of the world, whether it's the Washingtons from Arkansas, we don't really know. We can project it. We know Jeremiah Love is a one-on-one prospect, but that doesn't mean another player doesn't end up being that one-on-one player. That's why I value in having more picks, more darts to throw at the wall, and then having the team around them that you're adding them to. Realistically, man, you can have the greatest prospect in the world, man. You can draft the best running back in the world, but you don't have a good offensive line, then that prospect isn't going to thrive. We saw that early with, Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson was still Bijan Robinson, but the numbers are starting to accentuate what he has become as that offensive line is developed. The Washington Commanders do have a really good offensive line. That's why I do think the Jeremiah Love will be so impactful for this team. The other reason I think, that you got to be ahead on these things is like this. Paying a premier running back in this league, whether it's Jamar Gibbs, whether it's Bijan Robinson, we are going to see them guys reset the market for a running back. But the top running back in the NFL is Saquon Barkley right now with like $20 million a season. Christian McCaffrey, 19-20 million a season. We know these guys have impacts in the passing game, but for $20 million a year, you're getting a top 3 running back in the league, as far as production and, the impact that they're having. We know that a number one running back, that the top 3 running backs in the NFL have a higher impact than a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. But a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL is going to command north of about $30 million on the market, because of what JSN, because of what Jamar Chase, because of what, Justin Jefferson, you got the Terry McLaurins, the CeeDee Lambs, and there's a cluster of wide receivers. And, from year after year, from year to year, some of them guys will be in the top 5, and then the next year they'll be in the top 12. Depending on what you see it all fluctuates. It's very, very liquid. It moves around the rankings. So again, you could be paying $30 million a season for a wide receiver that's giving you top 15 production. Top 15 production in the NFL is probably about 1,000 yards receiving, maybe 6 or 7 touchdowns, something like that, to where a dynamic running back for $20 million a season, if they're really on it, that could be 1,700 yards, 400 receiving yards. It could be a total of 22 touchdowns. I mean, that one player for that one position, for that value of that contract, you can't beat it. So again, being ahead of the curve, the NFL cycles. We remember back in the 90s. We remember the late 90s, the early 2000s. Some of these the running backs in the market that they were getting, whether it was LaDainian Tomlinson, Shaun Alexander, Chris Johnson, we know the running backs. We all remember the names for them eras. Back in that day, having the top flight wide receiver on an elite level contract was giving you more production than those running backs in that league, and the league has cycled since then. We are getting to a point where it's going to start cycling back, and you always want to be ahead of the curve. You want to be the team that chases. You want to be the team winning the Super Bowl that teams are following. Everybody has been paying these quarterbacks, whether it's Dak Prescott making $60 million a year on an average annual value, the AAV. That's what I always talk about, AAV, average annual value. I know you know. But again, $60 million AAV for a quarterback that is, he's top 5. He's French top 5, top 10 consistently. You know what I'm saying? That there's a reason that he makes his money. But again, Dak Prescott, $60 million towards the cap every season. The Seattle Seahawks just came in with a quarterback that's making $41 million average annual value. But their defense, a unit, a complete unit. It was the time in the rotation and the life cycle that now the defense and the running game really, really impacted more than just having the quarterback and a couple situational role players and not having the elite level defense. This year, you finally saw it click. Again, you want to be ahead of the curve. Having the elite level running back, man, we know the Bijan Robinson impact that he could have if he gets the quarterback play at the Atlanta Falcons, and Drake London, the impact of him. Drake London's going to start commanding the money. Is Drake London a top 5 wide receiver in this league? He hasn't had that production yet. He has had flash moments in games where he has shown that he can be a top 5 wide receiver. But again, the impact of having a top 15 wide receiver and having the elite level running back in Bijan Robinson, if you had top 15, top 10 quarterback play on that roster, you're probably talking about a team that could compete for Super Bowls, but it just hasn't clicked for the Atlanta Falcons for multiple reasons. We all know the allocation of assets that they put into the quarterback position, whether it was Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix, and now Tua. They're getting Tua at a value, but again, it's about being ahead of the curve. The Detroit Lions, back when they drafted Jamari Gibbs, that's too high to draft a running back. Jamari Gibbs, we see what he does. Top 15 quarterback play. Whatever you think about Jared Goff, he's still top 15 quarterback play. We've seen holes on that defense. We've seen injuries, kind of limit that team. But again, having Amon-Ra St. Brown, another $30 million average annual value. Is Amon-Ra St. Brown giving you top 5, wide receiver production? Some weeks he is, some weeks he's not. But I would say he's top, he's definitely top 15. He's definitely in that market. But Bijan Robinson is the more impactful player. But then you even factor it into another position that if you can have a top 3, top 5, production at that position, Sam Laporta. You have Sam Laporta and a Jamari Gibbs on your roster. That is why that offense thrives the way that it does. It's week to week. You see Sam Laporta. You see Jamari Gibbs. Jamari Gibbs is the constant. But, Sam Laporta and then, having Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's why that team is elevated to the way that they have, building the way that they have, getting rid of Matt Stafford, getting a quarterback that could play top 15 level football on that team while they had all the draft capital to be able to add Aiden Hutchinson, a premier dominant pass rusher in this league. You start to get him some help across from him, and that Detroit Lions roster is really, really talented. And if Detroit can get over the hump that they've never been able to get over, they have a real chance, and that's called getting ahead of the curve. Having the complete roster all the way around the quarterback. No, it isn't the top 5 quarterback. No, it isn't the Sam Brown. No, it isn't. The Matt Stafford, that they got rid of, that's out there playing with the, top flight wide receivers and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, having a solid running back. There's multiple ways, man. There's multiple ways to do it, man. There's multiple ways to get to the Super Bowl. Ultimately, a lot of it factors on health. Everybody's chasing, how did this team do it? How did this team do it? Well, ultimately, in the end of the day, man, having your star players healthy at the right time is ultimately how you do it. There's a lot of ways to build a roster. Teams, people always say defense wins championships. Well, for all the years that Patrick Mahomes was winning Super Bowls, defense damn sure wasn't winning championships. Having a top 15 defense with a top flight level quarterback, the truly special quarterback, and the right coaching staff, and the Tyreek Hill, the over the top weapon that you just can't scheme against. And then having the tight end space eater at the underneath, and then having Isaiah Pacheco, who was healthy at the time, giving you top 15 running back production. Again, that was the recipe. Well, it shifted this past year. Having a top 15, running back production between your 2 running backs in Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker and things like that, with that elite level defense with a top 15 level quarterback. That's more along the lines of the Detroit Lions build. That's what I'm saying. This is why I am trying so hard, and this is why I'm stressing the Jeremiah Love thing so much. like I said, there's multiple ways to do it. Do I want a dominating defense on the Washington Commanders? Of course I do, man. I want that Darryl Green level cornerback, man. I want that, that Patrick Surtain, man. Trust me, I scout cornerbacks. I love cornerbacks. Cornerback is the position that I love the most. So again, I would love to have that premier level cornerback on this team. Another expensive position. I would love to have that dominating pass rusher on this team. Another super expensive position. Do we need to find them players? Yes, we do. That's what drafting and developing is going to be. 5 years down the road, I hope we have those two positions, filled out from Adam Peters in the draft and the priorities that he's put at those positions. That's where development comes in. Mikey Samerstill, Trey Amos, maybe it's a third round player in this draft, whether it's a Moore from Michigan, a guy I've talked about ad nauseum over the course of the college football season and things like that. But getting a Jeremiah Love with the quarterback, we haven't seen it. We just haven't seen it. Back in the day, you had Warwick Dunn and T.J. Duckett and Michael Vick in the Atlanta Falcons. They gave you something close. But Michael Vick at that time wasn't the elite level passer that he was. Fast forward to when he got with Andy Reid and, the Donovan McNabb situation played out the way that it did. And then you had Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson. You had that elite level burner over the top, the best skill set for, again, Michael Vick in that Philly era is almost what I'm trying to, almost trying to simulate with how I'm explaining for Jaden Daniels, where Michael Vick wasn't running around like he used to run. He was a different level runner, but he had advanced as a passer. He became, kind of became that top 10, level passer with the Philadelphia Eagles because he had the over the top. We always knew he had the arm. He always had the deep ball, and then they gave him the elite level weapon in Deshaun Jackson. Then he had Jeremy Maclin at the other position, and he was starting to hit him, and that's what really excelled him as a passer. Not that he didn't have Roddy White and guys like that when he was in the Atlanta Falcons, but he had advanced as a passer under Andy Reid, and Andy Reid stylistically played Michael Vick to the strengths of his roster. But he had LaShawn McCoy, who was a top 3 level running back in the NFL. That's what I'm saying. This team, and that team could have competed for Super Bowls. Realistically, if Michael Vick was a couple years younger, I think that team would have had a window where they could have competed for Super Bowls. That's what I'm trying to get to with Jaden Daniels, where Jaden Daniels is going to run. It's a part of his game. He's always going to run. But you want him to run where it costs teams. You don't want him to run because it's schematically what you need to do to continue to advance the ball down the football field. You want that to be a bonus to what you're doing, not the identity of what you're doing. We saw it last year when Jaden Daniels is forced to run. He's not the biggest guy. It's good. Injuries can pile up on guys that are built with his frame. We saw Michael Vick, the injuries piled up over time when it was all about him running. What you want to do is, and Jaden Daniels is a much further along passer already, and he's still got room to grow in that department than what Michael Vick still ended up becoming. Even over Lamar Jackson, we've seen him excel as a passer these past couple of years, but we've also seen the team success go down. There's also some, issues at the wide receiver position. I think he does have an elite level, deep ball threat in Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is a really, really good player. I don't think he gets the love that he gets, but he is a really, really good player, and he is a deep vertical threat, and he can also, accentuate things, with the ball in his hands in the short to intermediate game. They need, other compliments, because when you see Rashad Bateman clicking, when you see Mark Andrews getting it done, I'm not saying Lamar Jackson hasn't progressed to that level of passer, because he has. We just haven't seen the team success. Again, you got King Henry a little bit later. He still had the numbers, he still had the digits, but that team is, the team has just had some things over there in Baltimore. Again, right place, right time, health, it all matters to get to the Super Bowl, man. The Lamar Jackson should have gotten himself to a Super Bowl. We've seen reasons why he hasn't gotten to the AFC Championship game, the week before the AFC Championship game where they lost to the Bills. The Bills lost to the Chiefs. Again, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, but again, it's right place, right time. It's injuries and things like that. Stylistically right now, the best thing that the Washington Commanders can do, the best thing, and I've mentioned it before, get weapons for Jaden Daniels. His development, his health, long term, the confidence of this guy in the first 5 years is going to be what supplements this guy for the rest of his career. If he's constantly injured, if it's constantly on his shoulders to win the game, if you're not getting him elite level weapons around him, then you are failing him as a prospect. You have failed him in his development, because eventually it's going to catch up to him. Yes, you can get him that defense, and we do need to get him defense. You got to be able to get off the field. But right now, the most important, you have made moves in free agency that are going to get you towards that. We are going to be a better team defensively simply because of adding to the mid-level tier of players on this roster. We didn't even have those last year, especially on the depth pieces once the injuries started to pile up. Getting Jaden Daniels, a running back that can carry the load, that he can start to use play action and use his legs to just simply move the pocket and just be a deadly passer. They want to stack the box, man. Jaden Daniels will torch you underneath, whether it's, hitting a quick out to the tight end, whether it's hitting Jeremiah Love as your safety outlet, on a screen pass, dumping the ball off to him when you got quick pressure because they put 8 in the box. The, quick slant wasn't there to Terry. Hit Jeremiah Love on the out and just on the wheel route and things like that. There's so many things stylistically that you can do based off of what the teams are trying to do to you on defense. Adding this level piece is it's going to be a dynamic element. Whether Jeremiah Love is available to us, we're gonna go back and forth on that. The fact that I'm seeing so many reports on this, it could be to bring up trade value. Anna Peters is not a dumb guy. He knows that, teams around the league are not going to want Jeremiah Love with Jaden Daniels in the same backfield. So you're going to have to get ahead of him, or you're going to have to trade to us. At the same time, that could be the whole thing about trading down and things like that. So again, this pod was basically, it's pro days. There's a lot of things going on. Anna Peters, Lance Newmark, the key contingency is going to be at the Ohio State Pro Day. I told you we're going to be busy with this week in pro days. There's a ton of players. I highlighted Caden McDonald because he's probably the guy that I've talked about the least on that defense. But, when you're talking Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, Igbinosun, Sonny Styles' brother, the safety, who ran a 4.2, a sub 4.3 combine 40. Trust me, man, there's dudes at Ohio State's Pro Day on all 3 levels throughout the draft that, are going to be impact players in this league. Like I said, man, Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, the top end of the draft, and then the Caden McDonald, the first round of the draft. And then, you're talking Igbinosun, probably second, third round in the draft. Trust me, man, Ohio State's going to be putting them out. They're definitely going to be putting out the players all throughout this draft. Could even set a record for how many players go in the top 10, in this draft. And honestly, Caden McDonald in his own right for one team, if he can make one team in the top 10 fall in love with him, they really could set a record for the most players to go in the top 10 in this draft. So again, man, Cardinal Tate in his own right, Jeremiah Love, we know what they got coming down the pipeline there, for next year and beyond. Ohio State gets them. They get the players. So again, thank you guys for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast, man. I really wanted to kind of get into a couple different avenues. I didn't want to just keep pounding these same names. I wanted to talk about, a little bit more team building stylistically, a lot of things, man. Just, I love talking ball. That's the whole point of this podcast, man. There's no right and wrong way to build a roster. Ultimately, like I said, it takes health. It takes the right things at the right time. That the roster has to click and all that. So again, thank you guys for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast, man. I'll be reporting on the Ohio State, the Alabama Pro Days and things like that for today. I'll do that on tomorrow's episode. And again, man, just thank you guys, man. Like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, man, you want to debate anything that I said because you don't agree with it, man, just put it on there, man. I'm not going to talk shit. It just is what it is. We can just talk ball. But again, thank you guys for checking out the podcast, man. Continue to have a blessed week. Peace.